I think what President Zelensky and also the other European leaders are going to go with him to Washington. They're going to try to make sure that Trump doesn't stick 100% behind the position that he took on Friday when he saw President Putin. So they probably will try to convince him again of the notion or the idea that a ceasefire should be introduced first, and then slowly negotiations on the key issues on what Russia calls the root causes of the conflict should take place. And also probably they might be hoping to discuss, what kind of American reassurance can come to any kind of force or deployment that Europeans carry out in Ukraine if there is a ceasefire. So it's all a question of, I think, of sequencing of the issues that are sort of red lines for Ukraine and the Europeans, and on how to implement potentially some kind of ceasefire, or also potentially also the ways in which this reassurance force is to be deployed. Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to know whether this is something that Russia would accept, because it's been always one of the Russian red lines, no NATO troops, no sort of guarantees from the United States. If we remember at the very beginning, these were the points also that were reinforced by the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth when he came to Europe in the early spring. So I think that this would be an interesting change if Russia is ready to accept some form of a presence of NATO member states on the ground, or an American, some kind of an American reassurance in case that these forces are attacked in some way. Well, again, this is a very tricky question, because what the Ukrainians have accepted so far is to sort of, with a ceasefire agreement, to accept that de facto for some time the Ukrainians are not going to be able to retake these areas by force. So basically they remain de facto under Russian control. And this is a huge concession that they would be making. So I think that, the Ukrainians, so that is a very important point to note. And also to understand that it is very unlikely that the Ukrainians are going to pull back from areas that they currently control, especially if we talk about the areas in the Donbass, in Donetsk Oblast, because these areas are really the ones that are the most, the best defended areas, and where there are really strongholds of the Ukrainian military. So for the Ukrainians to pull back from that is really quite unacceptable. And I'm not talking just about President Zelensky, but even, internal actors, the military, others would have to sort of agree to that. And I find that very unlikely. And there is also a point which I think is often forgotten when we discuss territory. And that's the question of people. What happens to all the people who are living there? I mean, are they going to be allowed to stay? Is there going to be some form of ethnic cleansing, as we are seeing in the areas that Russia already occupies, where there is an erasure of Ukrainian culture, where many of the young men are forced to fight on the side of Russia against Ukraine, and maybe their relatives, their family. There are a lot of points when we talk about sort of handing in all these territories, even de facto to the Russians. And I think it's very important that we start talking about these issues as well, and make emphasis on the challenges that implies.